The ocean breeze at my seaside villa always felt like freedom, my sanctuary, after years of grueling work to build my financial consulting career. When that email notification chimed in my Tokyo hotel room, I never imagined my own parents would sell my dream home without permission to cover my sister's gambling debts. "You did not need it anyway." "Right," they wrote, as if my decade of sacrifices meant nothing. My fingers trembled as I closed my laptop and made 2 calls, one to the police, one to my lawyer. They had no idea what was coming. Before I dive into this painful story, let me know where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe. If you have ever had family betray your trust, trust me, you will want to see how this ends. I am Montgomery Collins, 34 years old, and until last month, I thought I had everything figured out. After growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland, I clawed my way through state college with scholarships and part-time jobs, eventually landing an entry-level position at Westbrook Financial Consulting. For 10 years, I poured every ounce of energy into building my career, skipping vacations, working weekends, and living in a tiny apartment to save every penny possible. When I finally purchased my seaside villa in Malibu 3 years ago, it represented everything I had sacrificed for. The moment I turned the key in that front door and heard the distant crash of waves against the shore, I knew every late night and missed social event had been worth it. I had designed the renovation myself, an open concept, main floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the sunset perfectly, a master bedroom that opened onto a private deck, and a small guest house, where I imagined my future children might play someday. That villa was not just a home, it was tangible proof that a middle-class kid from Portland could make something of himself through sheer determination. Every morning, I would take my coffee out to the deck, watch the waves, and remind myself that anything was possible with enough hard work. The Tokyo business trip was supposed to be another stepping stone in my carefully planned life. Westbrook had been courting Japanese investors for months, and my boss had chosen me to lead the presentation, a potential $40 million deal that would almost certainly secure my promotion to partner. For 2 weeks straight, I had barely slept, perfecting every slide, memorizing economic forecasts, and rehearsing answers to possible questions until my throat was raw. My hotel room at the Park Hyatt Tokyo had become a second office. Room service trays piled up as I worked 18-hour days, fine-tuning the presentation that would take place the following morning. The lights of Tokyo sparkled outside my window, but I barely noticed them. Everything was riding on this meeting: my promotion, my future at the company, the respect of my colleagues. Around midnight, I decided to check my emails one last time before attempting a few hours of sleep. Most were related to the presentation, last-minute data from the research team, good luck messages from colleagues, a note from my boss reminding me how critical this meeting was. But then an email with the subject line, "About the house important," caught my eye. It was from my father's email address, but something about the casual tone immediately felt off. "Hey, Montgomery," it began. "Your mother and I wanted to let you know that we sold your beach house. Jessica got into some trouble with her gambling again. This time much worse, about $850,000 with some dangerous people. We had to act fast, and since you are doing so well and have that nice apartment in the city anyway, we figured you would not mind helping your sister out. The new owners wanted to move in quickly, so we used that spare key you gave us for emergencies and cleared out most of your things into storage. You did not need it anyway. Right. Talk when you get back. Dad." I read the email 3 times, certain it must be some kind of sick joke. My sister Jessica had struggled with gambling problems since college, but nothing on this scale. And my parents, while sometimes frustratingly eager to make excuses for her, had never done anything remotely like this before. The room seemed to spin as reality sank in. A wave of nausea hit me, and I rushed to the bathroom, barely making it before emptying the contents of my stomach. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead as I sat on the marble floor, trying to process what I had just read. My hands shook so badly, I could barely dial my father's number. The call went straight to voicemail. Same with my mother's phone. I texted and called Jessica, but all I got was a brief message. "Sorry, bro. I messed up. We'll explain when you are home. Love you." I pulled up my banking app scanning for any unusual activity, then checked my email for any official documentation about the sale. Nothing, which meant they had somehow forged my signature or falsified documents. The realization felt like ice water in my veins. This was not just a family betrayal, it was fraud. How could they possibly have sold my house without my consent? The logical part of my brain kicked into problem-solving mode even as emotions threatened to overwhelm me. I needed to contact the police. I needed a lawyer. I needed to stop this sale before it was finalized. But as I sat there on the bathroom floor of a luxury hotel room halfway across the world, another thought kept interrupting my planning. How could my own parents do this to me? That villa represented far more than its $4 million market value. I had spent months working with architects to design the renovations, creating spaces that reflected who I was and what I valued. The kitchen island, made from reclaimed wood, reminded me of my grandfather's workshop. The blue tile backsplash matched the exact shade of the ocean on a clear day. The reading nook in the living room housed the first edition books I had collected over years of attending estate sales. More than the structure itself, the villa held irreplaceable items. My grandfather's handcrafted fishing rods hung on the den wall. The painting, my college roommate, now a successful artist, had given me before his death in a car accident 3 years ago. Photo albums from my childhood that my mother had insisted I take when I finally got a proper home. All these pieces of my life potentially scattered or sold or simply thrown away without a second thought. I had always been careful about money. My financial security was hard-won, but the villa had been my one indulgence, the place where I allowed myself to dream about a future with a family of my own someday, the place where I felt truly at peace. And my parents had sold it to bail out Jessica. Again, this was not the first time my sister's gambling had created chaos. It started with small loans in college that she never repaid, then escalated to maxed-out credit cards. I helped pay off then a second mortgage on her condo that I co-signed when she promised she was getting help. But $850,000, this was exponentially worse than anything before. Through a series of frantic calls to mutual friends, I learned Jessica had been playing in underground poker games for months, borrowing from loan sharks associated with organized crime. My parents had already depleted their retirement savings, trying to help her, a fact they had hidden from me during our weekly calls. One particularly painful revelation came from my Aunt Linda, who reluctantly admitted my parents had been enabling Jessica's behavior for years. "They always made excuses for her, Montgomery," she said softly. "Even when you both were children, she got away with things you never would have. I love my brother, but he and your mother have different rules for Jessica than they ever had for you." The pattern was painfully clear now. Throughout my life, I had been expected to be the responsible one, the steady one, the one who would understand when plans changed because of Jessica's latest crisis. Now they had crossed a line I never imagined possible, and something inside me hardened with resolve. This time would be different. The Tokyo deal was effectively dead the moment I read that email. There was no way I could focus on economic forecasts and investor relations when my life was imploding. At 5 in the morning, I called my boss, Walter, and explained that an urgent family emergency required my immediate return to the States. "Montgomery, you understand the importance of this presentation," Walter said, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. "We have been working toward this for months. These investors have flown in specifically to meet with you." "I understand completely, sir," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "But this is an emergency involving potential criminal activity that requires my presence. I would not ask if there were any alternative." After a tense silence, Walter sighed. "Alan can step in. He has been involved in most of the preparation, but I will not pretend this does not damage your standing with the firm. We will discuss your future when you return." The career implications were serious, but in that moment, they seemed distant compared to the immediate crisis. I booked the first available flight back to Los Angeles, packed my bags, and left the presentation materials with detailed notes for Alan. As the plane took off, I stared out the window at the shrinking Tokyo skyline, wondering if I would have a home or a family to return to when this was over. The confrontation at my parents' suburban ranch house was every bit as awful as I had imagined during the 14-hour flight. My mother burst into tears the moment she opened the door, while my father stood in the background, arms crossed defensively. "How could you" were the only words I managed at first, my voice cracking with emotion. "You do not understand how bad things were. Montgomery," my father said, his tone distressingly reasonable. "These were dangerous people threatening your sister. We had no choice. You had countless choices. You could have called me. You could have gone to the police. You could have gotten her into treatment. Instead, you committed fraud and sold my house, my home, without my consent." My mother dabbed at her eyes. "We knew you would be upset, but you have always been the strong one. Jessica needs more help than you do. She always has." That simple statement, delivered as if it were an obvious truth, hit me like a physical blow. In their eyes, my success was actually a reason to take from me rather than a cause for pride. My stability made me an acceptable target. "Where is Jessica now?" I demanded. Exchanged glances between my parents revealed another unpleasant truth. She is staying with friends," my mother said carefully. "She felt it would be better to give you some space." Translation: my sister was hiding from the consequences of her actions, just as she always had. And my parents were facilitating it, just as they always had. "You forged my signature," I said flatly. "You committed fraud. Do you understand that is a felony, that you could go to prison? You would send your own parents to prison." My father's voice rose in genuine shock. "After everything we have done for you," in that moment, I realized how completely different our perspectives were. In their version of reality, selling my home without permission was something I should accept because family comes first. In actual reality, they had committed a serious crime and violated my trust in the most fundamental way possible. "Where are my things?" "My grandfather's fishing rods, the painting from James, my books." My mother looked down. "We had to move quickly. The storage unit was small. We kept what we could, but—" I turned and walked out without another word, the rest of her sentence hanging in the air behind me. My attorney, Harold Blackwood, did not sugarcoat the situation when I met with him the following morning. "The forgery makes this straightforward from a legal perspective," he said, reviewing the documents I had obtained from the county recorder's office. "This is fraud, plain and simple. The sale should be invalidated once we prove the signatures are fake." "And my parents?" I asked, the question physically painful to voice. Harold removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Montgomery, I will be direct with you. Your parents committed multiple felonies: document forgery, fraud, possibly wire fraud, depending on how the money changed hands. The district attorney would have a very strong case. What are my options? You can report this to the police, which I would normally recommend without hesitation. The sale would almost certainly be reversed. Your parents would likely face criminal charges. Or," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "you could handle this as a civil matter. Try to unwind the sale through the courts without involving law enforcement. It would be slower and less certain, but might spare your parents from criminal prosecution." I sat silently, weighing decades of family history against the enormity of what they had done. Finally, I made my decision. I need to report this, not just for me, but for Jessica too. This cycle has to stop. Harold nodded solemnly. "For what it is worth, I think that is the right call. Difficult but right." Officer Thompson of the Los Angeles Police Department maintained a professional demeanor as I filed the report, but I could see the sympathy in her eyes as I explained the situation. Unfortunately, we see this kind of family fraud more often than you might think, she said, typing notes into her computer. When it involves family members, people often feel conflicted about pressing charges. I do feel conflicted, I admitted. But I need my home back, and my sister needs to face consequences for once in her life. The officer nodded. The detective assigned to your case will want to verify the forged signatures and take statements from all parties involved. I should warn you, cases like this often get worse before they get better in terms of family relationships. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my upcoming confrontations with my parents, sister, and extended family members who would inevitably take sides. No, I was not prepared, but I was determined. I am ready to see this through, I said firmly. As I signed the official complaint, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. The police just called us. I cannot believe you would do this to your own family. Your mother is devastated. Before I could respond, another message arrived. This one from an unknown number. Your sister owes a lot of money to people who do not like waiting. Dropping charges would be smart for everyone. The thinly veiled threat sent a chill down my spine. Officer, I said, showing her the message, I think this situation might be more complicated than I realized. Within 48 hours, what had seemed like a straightforward case of family fraud took a darker turn. Detective Maria Garcia called me into the station to discuss new developments. We have been tracking a money laundering operation using real estate transactions, she explained, spreading photographs across the table. The buyers of your property are connected to at least 3 other fraudulent purchases in the last year. She showed me surveillance photos of well-dressed men entering the offices of Coastal Realty, the agency that had handled my property sale. These are not ordinary homebuyers. They are associates of a criminal organization using properties to clean money. Your house was never going to be a home for anyone. It was just another transaction in their operation. Did my sister know this? I asked, stomach churning at the implications. We are still investigating that angle. But someone connected her gambling debts to these buyers very deliberately. The real estate agent, Marcus Doyle, has facilitated several suspicious transactions. We believe he specifically targeted your property after learning about your sister's situation. I sat back processing this information. So this is bigger than my family's betrayal. Detective Garcia nodded grimly. Much bigger. Which is why we need your cooperation. If you are willing to help us, we might be able to catch some very dangerous people and get your property back in the process. For the first time since reading that fateful email, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe there was a way to resolve this that served justice without destroying my family completely. Meeting Jessica at a downtown diner the next day was harder than I had anticipated. My sister had always been charismatic and vibrant, the life of every party. The woman who slid into the booth across from me was a shadow of that person, thin to the point of gauntness, with dark circles under bloodshot eyes and hands that trembled slightly as she reached for her water. You look terrible, I said, unable to soften my approach after everything that had happened. Yeah, well, having gangsters threaten to break your legs will do that to you, she replied with a ghost of her old sarcastic humor. I really messed up this time, Monty. You think I snapped. You have been messing up for years, Jess. But selling my house, getting Mom and Dad to commit felony fraud, that is a whole new level. She looked down at her hands. I did not ask them to do that. Did you stop them? Did you tell them it was wrong? Or did you just let it happen because it solved your problem? Her silence was answer enough. $850,000, Jessica. How does anyone even get that deep? It started small. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. I would win some back then, lose more. The casino banned me, so I found underground games. Then I started borrowing to cover losses, betting bigger to try to get even. She looked up, eyes swimming with tears. I kept thinking I could fix it before anyone found out. And now, a frightening emptiness crossed her face. I placed a bet last night, 20,000 on a basketball game. My blood ran cold. You are still gambling. After everything that has happened, I cannot stop Monty. I have tried. After the house was sold, I swore I was done. Lasted 4 days. She wiped her eyes. I always thought you had it easy. You know, perfect grades, perfect job, perfect life. But now I think maybe I was the one who had it easy. Mom and Dad always made excuses for me, always cleaned up my messes. They never made me face anything. For the first time, I saw my sister clearly not as the spoiled favorite, but as someone failed by the very people who thought they were helping her. We are going to fix this, I said firmly. But not the way Mom and Dad have been trying to fix things. Real help means facing consequences, Jess. That night I drove to my parents' house for what I hoped would be an honest conversation at last. My mother opened the door with red-rimmed eyes, looking 10 years older than when I had seen her 2 days before. The police called again, she said quietly. They said we might be charged with fraud. Criminal fraud, Montgomery. Yes, I replied simply as I followed her into the living room where my father sat stiffly in his recliner. That is what happens when you forge someone's signature and sell their property illegally. We were desperate, my father said, but the defensiveness had drained from his voice, replaced by genuine fear. These men, they came to the house. They showed us pictures of Jessica coming out of her apartment, going to work. They knew her schedule. They said they would hurt her if the money was not paid. So you decided to hurt me instead. I said the words, like stones between us. My mother broke down completely, then sobbing as she explained their reasoning. How they had always protected Jessica from consequences. How they had depleted their retirement savings, taken a second mortgage on their home, and still come up short. How the threat to Jessica had seemed so immediate, while the harm to me had seemed abstract and fixable. She needs real help, not another bailout, I said when they had finished. And I need my home back. The sale is done, Montgomery, my father said hollowly. The money is gone. Even if we wanted to undo it, we cannot. I leaned forward, meeting their eyes directly. The police think the buyers are part of a money laundering operation. They want to set up a sting, and they need your help. If you cooperate, they might go easier on the charges against you. My parents exchanged alarmed glances. Money laundering. What have we gotten involved in? That is what happens when you deal with loan sharks and people who prey on gambling addicts, I replied. Will you help make this right? After a long moment, my father nodded slowly. Tell us what to do. Alone in my sterile downtown apartment later that night, I poured a glass of whiskey and stood by the window staring out at the city lights. This glass and steel box had never been home, just a convenient place to sleep near the office. My real home, with its ocean views and carefully chosen furnishings, was in legal limbo. For hours I wrestled with conflicting emotions. The betrayal still burned fresh, but seeing Jessica's deterioration and my parents' fear had awakened something else. A complicated compassion that existed alongside my anger. Was fighting for the villa worth destroying what remained of my family? If I dropped the charges, could we heal from this? Or would that just enable more destruction down the road? I thought back to childhood lessons about family loyalty, about standing by people no matter what. But I also remembered my grandfather teaching me about integrity and facing consequences. A man stands by his word, he would say, and accepts what comes from his actions. Sometime around 3 in the morning, clarity finally came. True support meant helping people grow, not protecting them from consequences. Love did not mean enabling destructive behavior. And sometimes the hardest path was the only one that led somewhere worth going. With that resolution, I fell into an exhausted sleep. I was awakened 2 hours later by a call from my lawyer. Montgomery, something interesting has come up with your property. Are you familiar with a company called Coastal Horizons Development? The name sounded vaguely familiar. I think so. They approached me about 6 months ago about a partnership opportunity. I was considering it before my trip. Well, they have filed an injunction against the sale of your property. Apparently, you had entered into preliminary discussions about an eco-resort development that would preserve the historical elements of the property while creating a sustainable tourism model. They are claiming they had a handshake agreement with you that gives them right of first refusal on any sale. My mind raced back to those meetings, friendly conversations I had considered promising, but far from finalized. That is stretching the truth a bit, perhaps. But here is the interesting part. They have uncovered evidence that your property falls under a historical coastal preservation designation that legally prevents unauthorized sale or development without special review. And since you never authorized the sale, the transaction could be invalidated on those grounds alone. I finished a surge of hope rising in my chest. Exactly. And there is more. Their assessment values the property at nearly triple what your parents sold it for, given the development potential. For the first time in days, I smiled. I think we just found our leverage. Detective Garcia laid out the plan the next morning in a conference room at the police station. The operation is simple, she explained to me and two other officers. We will inform your parents that there is a problem with the paperwork on the sale. They will contact the real estate agent Marcus Doyle, who handled the transaction. Based on his pattern with other properties, he will likely request a meeting to fix the issue, and my parents will wear wires, I asked. We will have them fully equipped with audio and video. The meeting will take place at the title company offices, which we will have under surveillance. When Doyle and his associates arrive, we will be positioned to observe and intervene. What about Jessica's gambling debts, I asked, the people threatening her. We believe they are connected to the same organization. If we can make these arrests, stick the threats against your sister should resolve. But she will need to provide a statement as well. I nodded, already dreading the conversation where I would need to convince my sister to cooperate with police. What about my parents? Will they still face charges? Detective Garcia's expression softened slightly. That will ultimately be up to the district attorney. But their cooperation will certainly be taken into consideration, especially if it helps us bring down bigger targets. The plan was risky. My parents would be placing themselves in proximity to dangerous criminals. Jessica would need to admit her involvement with illegal gambling operations, but it was our best chance to resolve the situation without losing my property permanently. Let us do it, I said firmly. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparation. My parents were fitted with concealed recording devices and coached on what to say. Jessica agreed to provide a statement, though her hands shook so badly she could barely sign the paperwork. I watched from the secure room as Detective Garcia and her team prepared for every contingency. When Marcus Doyle finally called my parents, everything moved quickly. He sounded annoyed, but not suspicious, when my father explained that they had been contacted about a document issue. This is highly irregular, the agent said. The sale has already gone through. The funds have been dispersed. That is what concerns us, my father replied, following the script perfectly. The bank says the money was processed unusually quickly. We want to make sure everything is legitimate. Doyle paused, and I could almost hear his mental calculations. Fine. Meet me at the title company tomorrow at 10. I will bring the buyers so we can clear this up quickly. After he hung up, Detective Garcia smiled grimly. He took the bait. Now we wait. The title company office had been fitted with hidden cameras and microphones. Police officers posing as employees were positioned throughout the building. My parents arrived first, looking nervous but determined. Doyle arrived 10 minutes later with two well-dressed men who surveyed the room with calculating eyes. Mr. and Mrs. Collins Doyle said smoothly, "These are the new owners, Mr. Brennan and Mr. Sato. They are very concerned about any delays. We just want to make sure everything is in order," my mother said. "Our son is very upset about the sale. One of the men, Brennan, frowned. The transaction is complete. The property has changed hands legally. We are just confused about how quickly the money was processed, my father pressed. Usually these things take days, but the funds were available immediately. Doyle shifted uncomfortably. We have relationships with certain financial institutions that allow for expedited processing. What kind of relationships? My father asked innocently. The tension in the room ratcheted up as Doyle and Brennan exchanged glances. Sato leaned forward. Your concerns are noted but unnecessary, he said coldly. The property will undergo renovations soon to prepare it for its real purpose. The oceanfront location is ideal for our business interests. What business interests? My mother asked. Import divided by export, Brennan said quickly. Now, if you could just sign these final papers confirming you have no further claims on the property. As he pushed documents across the table, Doyle added, Sign these and the matter is closed. Your daughter's obligations will be considered fulfilled as well. My father froze. We never mentioned our daughter. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Brennan's hand moved toward his jacket, but before he could reach whatever he was carrying, the doors burst open and officers flooded in, police hands, where we can see them. The chaos that followed was brief but intense. Brennan attempted to flee, but was tackled by an officer near the exit. Sato and Doyle were handcuffed without resistance, though Doyle kept insisting he had done nothing illegal. My parents were quickly escorted to safety as evidence was collected and the suspects were led away. You did good, Detective Garcia told my parents afterward. Really good. We have them on multiple charges: money laundering, conspiracy, making criminal threats, and fraud. My father looked years older, his shoulders slumped with the weight of what they had done and what they had helped uncover. What happens now? To us, I mean. That conversation needs to include the District Attorney, Garcia said carefully. But your cooperation today will count for a lot. Jessica was waiting at my apartment when I returned, pacing anxiously. Is it over? Did they arrest those people? Yes, I said, setting down my keys. Doyle and 2 of his associates are in custody. The police think they will roll over on their bosses to get lighter sentences, and the threats against me should be resolved. But you need to stay clear of gambling, Jess. Completely. These people know who you are now. She nodded, picking at her sleeve. I called a treatment center this morning. They have a 90-day residential program. I start tomorrow. I looked at her in surprise. That is a big step. I hit bottom, Monty. Watching Mom and Dad wear wires to meet with criminals because of my gambling that finally got through to me. I cannot do this anymore. She took a shaky breath. I need real help. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope for my sister. I will support your recovery, Jess. But not financially. Not anymore. That is not the kind of help you need. I know, she whispered. I have taken advantage of everyone who loves me, especially you. I am so sorry about your house. It looks like I might get it back, I said, explaining about the historical designation and the Coastal Horizons injunction. The sale will almost certainly be invalidated. That is great, she said, genuine relief crossing her face. What about Mom and Dad? Will they go to prison? The DA is considering reduced charges in exchange for their testimony. They might get probation instead of jail time, but it is going to be rough for a while. Jessica nodded solemnly. We all need to face consequences. That is what you have been trying to tell me for years. Is not it? As she left for her apartment to pack for rehab, I felt the first stirrings of something that had been missing throughout this ordeal, hope that my family might actually learn and grow from this terrible experience. 1 year later, I stood on the deck of my villa, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of orange and pink. The legal battle had been lengthy, but ultimately successful. The fraudulent sale had been invalidated, and I had regained ownership of my home, though some of my belongings had been lost forever. My partnership with Coastal Horizons was proceeding well. We had developed plans for an eco-resort that would preserve the historic character of the property while creating something new and meaningful. Even more satisfying, I had insisted on creating an employment program for recovering addicts as part of the project. Jessica was 9 months sober, working as an administrative assistant and attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings 3 times weekly. Our relationship was slowly healing, built now on honesty rather than the enabling patterns of the past. She had moved into a modest apartment near her job and was paying her own bills for the first time in her adult life. My parents had received 5 years probation and community service requirements. The financial consequences were severe. Legal bills had forced them to sell their home and move into a small condo, but they had avoided prison. Our relationship remained complicated, but weekly family therapy sessions were helping us establish new, healthier boundaries. My career had taken a hit from the aborted Tokyo presentation, but not as severe as I had feared. Walter had been impressed by my handling of the family crisis and my eventual return to close several major domestic deals. I would not make partner this year, but my position at the firm was secure. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon, I reflected on the painful journey of the past year. The betrayal had nearly destroyed my family, but from those ashes, something stronger was emerging. We were learning that true love sometimes means standing firm, that boundaries are necessary for health, and that facing consequences is how we grow. The ocean breeze carried away the last of my bitterness as I turned to go inside. Some wounds may never fully heal, but I had discovered a resilience I never knew I possessed. And sometimes that is enough. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who kept making the same mistakes? Share your story in the comments below. Remember to like this video if you found value in my experience, subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges, and share with someone who might be struggling with similar situations. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling destructive behavior.